At the last board meeting, as Dr. Rickadelli pointed out, we had 4 policies that the board had some discussion on and asked us to bring back with some additional changes. So that's why they're back again as new business and an additional first read. 3217, 5772, and 7217 are all weapons and other destructive devices. They're basically the same policy, except for one deals with staff, one deals with students, and the other deals with community members. The new language that was added begins here where my cursor is, where it says, in addition, the board waives the vehicle exception as stated in Florida Statute 790.115. So that was the new paragraph that was added that dealt with the weapons, and it was added to all 3 policies.
All right, Mr. Mosier.
Let me just, after kind of reviewing and going over this, I just want to make it perfectly clear, where do we stand on this? I mean, if someone has a firearm in their car, their parent coming in, just picking up their child, I mean, how are we going to deal with that? As long as it's locked in the car? And then,
I'm not quite sure what you're asking me.
according to the policy, you're not allowed to have any guns in the car, so I just want to make sure if someone's happened to be picking their child up at school, they have a firearm in their car, they're not going to get any trouble for it, it's locked, they're not going into the building with it, and just trying to make sure it's, we can make an exception for something like that.
Couple of things. One, under board direction earlier in the year, we added signage to all our facilities that basically said you can't bring weapons onto our campus, you can't bring them into our buildings, and so forth. This clause that was added into this policy basically backs that same directive that you guys provided to us earlier. Does that answer your question?
After I got a phone call and ran into someone last week, and they were just kind of concerned about the policy and just didn't want to get into any trouble. It was a lady that had an incident with her ex-spouse, and she has a restraining order against him, and feels that she has to carry at all times, and she has to pick her kids up at school because it's a mile or two from her house, and she's afraid her husband might turn her in on carrying a gun to protect herself. So that kind of what sparked my attention on when that was brought up to me. So I was just trying to accommodate that.
Ms. Eaton, maybe one of the issues, and maybe it'll help him, is that if you look at the statute, which is 790.115, it indicates that when referring to a vehicle, except the school district may adopt written and published policies that waive the exception for purposes of student or campus, meaning public parking privileges. The goal was to try to create a safe area, which, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the goals of the superintendent. So these two statutes come together that provide a waiver to give the superintendent and the board the ability to make sure that there is a waiver of the vehicle policy that you were referring to before. So it's really within the policy discretion of the board at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbane. And I did provide that statute to Mr. Mosier earlier today.
So in the statute, do we have the waiver in that for the...
It's basically the same language. We copied it straight from statute.
Okay.
So that piece that I highlighted for you earlier,
Right.
that's, yeah.
So you have, for example, under 790.25(4), the possession of such weapons in a private conveyance, Mr. Mosier, such as an automobile. But then that links up with 7115, which then allows that to be waived because it puts in a vehicle pursuant to 790.25(4), except the school districts may adopt a policy that waive the exception for the purposes of student and other parking privileges. So they are meant to kind of mesh with one another.
So because of state statute, we said we can do that, and we're just overriding that?
Well, we're not overriding the statute, we're exercising the grant of authority within the statute to be able to do so.
Correct.
So if a parent came in, you know, locked in the glove compartment, is that going to violate anything? Just trying to make it simply clear.
Well, if they just decide unilaterally to park on a campus parking area, and all of this is a campus, I think it would be a violation of policy. I mean, that's how I would process that, and I defer to my colleagues as well.
That's what I thought, and I just don't think that's acceptable if it's locked in a vehicle.
I think it's important for you to remember that the school district is not the sheriff's department, so what it says in here is that me or administrators or school employees can go to law enforcement officials and make a report if that's what they see, if they are concerned about something. But the reality is every car that comes on the property is not searched. It's a situation where it's reported. Now you were describing a situation where a wife is or a lady is worried about her ex-husband reporting her as having something in their car.
Oh, correct.
What would happen is if there was a threat, let's just say the ex-husband says, oh, she's a threat and she's coming onto campus, and then he makes a call to us, we would have no choice but to report that to law enforcement, which, you know, obviously we have deputies. We would have to do that, and then law enforcement can, they'll do what they deem necessary. But for us, if it's reported to us that there's something on a campus, then it's important for us to have this in place, because you're talking about one person, but there could be any situation that occurs where somebody has something in their car and it's reported, maybe that person is a danger. We wouldn't know. So I think that's really important for us to have this as an option, and that we like Mr. Fishbane said, that we exercise that waiver.
Where I think superintendent has a point, staff wouldn't be in the business of going up and down a parking lot to see which car to search. They wouldn't really know. It's more in the nature of what they become aware of than act accordingly on. We would not seek to violate, search and seizure rights. That's more in the nature of what law enforcement would do on the basis of a report.
Right, I just don't need, like, an ex-spouse knowing that the husband, knowing the wife has it, making the call, saying that she's going to threat or do something when she has no intention to do it, kind of like the swatting issue that happened over at Naples High School, and I don't need that other parent, to go through. So I'm sure the Collier Sheriff will address it, accordingly. So that's just what I'm concerned about.
I don't, again, it's for your discussion, board, but I don't see that this proposal would in any way cause the board to affect that colleague or woman's rights at that moment. Rather, it becomes an issue of what we learn and then take the appropriate action. Does that make sense?
Okay. Well.
All right, Mr. Rutherford?
I see a number of problems here because in today's hostile environment, many women especially are carrying guns in their vehicles for their own personal protection. I don't know how you can get around something like that, or some men have them. But it appears to me that if someone were to walk by, say a student or another person, and glance into the car and see that weapon down by the seat of the car, they could report that person, and then there'd be problems. Now, I guess what you're going to say is that, well, we'll have to take it person by person, situation by situation. Is that correct?
You would have to, but you're absolutely right as to the first part. If you would see that, and then you know what the policy is, especially staff, they would have to report that as a violation. So both statements you're making are true.
Okay. Mrs. Lucarelli?
Thank you. I think we have to think about all of the possible scenarios. You brought up one possible scenario, but what about the scenario where an elderly parent is at home and sees her son who is leaving to go pick up their child and is distraught and took a gun out of their safe to go pick up the son, knowing that he's distraught or whatever, and is headed over to our school and calls to report that. We want to be able to apprehend that person and use whatever means necessary to ensure that that person isn't going to be a detriment, obviously, to anyone at the school. So I can understand and I see both of your points, but I feel like for our sake and for the sake of all of the children in all of our schools, it's better for us to err on the side of caution.
Mr. Carter, do you have any comments?
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Rutherford made a comment about if they walk by and see the gun. If you can actually see the gun, then in my mind, that's not a secured weapon. So either policy, that would still be a violation of each policy. So, if you can see the gun, unlike what Mr. Mosier was saying, that if it's in the glove box, it can't be seen. So either policy, the old one or this revision, seeing it would be a violation of the policy anyway. And I think if a parent's coming to a teacher conference or whatever, I think they should have the wisdom to leave their gun home. But I think Mr. Mosier is making a different point than that. But anyways, I think we need to err on the caution of limited firearms on campus, except for people that are authorized to use them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carter. Mr. Rutherford?
Have you ever tried to grab a weapon out of a pocket of a car? You need it right where you can grab it. But besides that, since grammar school, personally, I and all the kids I grew up with had a pocket knife. It wasn't for cutting somebody else, it was for whittling or cutting fish bait or whatever. So I don't think you can cover every possible situation. You just can't do it. Right now, matter of fact, I left my pocket knife at home because I said, if I get caught with that, I'm in trouble. But I always carry a pocket knife. So, like I said, there's no way to cover every possible situation.
All right, Mr. Mosier?
Again, if there's an intent for someone to hurt someone, they're going to hurt someone. We don't have a policy about not carrying a 5-gallon can of gasoline and matches into the school because, that can do a lot of damage also. So it's the intent of someone doing something and hurting somebody. And not everyone that carries a gun into a place is going to attempt to, hurt somebody when they're doing that. It's their Second Amendment right to carry that gun. I mean, someone can carry a 5-gallon can of gasoline in or a cup of gas and throw it and cause much more harm than they can with a gun. It's the intent of the person that wants to hurt somebody. So I don't think carrying a gun keeping it in your vehicle if you picked up a child at school is an intent to do something, even though it's there.
While the statute mentions weapons, certainly the focus is on guns. So that's why there's a reference back to 790.25.4. I'll read it to you. Possession in a private conveyance, notwithstanding 790.01, which gives all the definitions of what constitutes a weapon, if you go back and have a look at it. A person 18 years of age or older who is in lawful possession of a handgun or other weapon may possess such a handgun or weapon within the interior of a private conveyance if the handgun or weapon securely encased, not otherwise readily accessible. A person who possesses a handgun or other weapon, as authorized under this paragraph, may not carry it on his or her person. And then you go back to 791.15, which then clearly states that can be waived. And that's what the district, I should say the school board, can do so, because it says, for purposes of student and campus parking privileges, the intent being that the school district is a separate area, because it says, except that school districts may adopt written and published policies that waive the exception, which is, I think, really what this discussion ultimately is about.
All right, I can understand the student not having a gun in the car in the policy because, they're technically not allowed to have it. You got to be 21. so it shouldn't be in their car on school property. They're coming here to get educated, and that's pretty much it. Where a parent or an adult can kind of come in and out for the sole purpose of picking up a child. And then they're on and leave. They might live 5 miles away or an hour away from where they have to go. If it's a charter school, they're coming from one end of the county to the other to drop their child off. So I'm just trying to,
So are you making a recommendation to change the language here?
yes.
And what would that language be?
Just as long as it's concealed in the vehicle while it's on the property, that's fine. I mean, glove box, that, you know,
So let me give a scenario, because it recently happened at one of our schools, where a young man was unnerved, screaming obscenities into a megaphone at a school, on school property, allegedly had a gun in his truck. So in my view, someone that is obviously has some mental issues, and that close to a school and has a weapon in his vehicle is very concerning to me. And as a parent with children who are in that school, I would go with Mrs. Lucarelli and Mr. Carter's suggestion of erring on the side of caution here, when we're dealing with hundreds, thousands of children that we're responsible for. So I'm just gonna.
well, that's one.
So what's the, I guess what I have to go back to though, what is your proposed language of changing?
I'm not sure how it would go, but that person's there to cause an issue at the school for whatever reason. He's not there as a parent picking it up. He's causing a problem. He's causing a scene. I mean, I don't think it's acceptable for someone to stand out in front of any school with the megaphone, you know, doing their complaints. I mean, any of the students that are in the school have nothing to do with that the school is being run, and he should be dealt with accordingly. I mean, whether he had a gun in the vehicle or not, I mean, disturbing the school is not right.
So I just want to remind you of something. At the end of the day, it is not me or you who would make an arrest. It is ultimately the decision of the sheriff's department. But what I proposed to you the last time we met was, I will never go on record as being the person who says that I think it is okay for anyone to have a loaded gun in their car on a school campus, because emotions, anything can happen. I referenced the Super Bowl parade. The man who shot, he had a gun on him. He doesn't even know why he was shooting. He's shooting and he ruined his life, right? So I use that example. I'll use another example. An adult student comes to our technical college. They're an adult student. They have a loaded gun in their car. Someone else sees it and reports it. We don't know that person, if somebody else saw it and is aware of it, then it's out in the open like somebody else was saying earlier. That is a concern because anybody can go take that. Anybody can break into that car. It's not like cars don't get broken into. So what I'm saying to you is, I don't want that responsibility on me. What the sheriff's department decides to do, that is on them. I will never be the person who loses my license. Remember, I used the example, every single week, pretty much of the school year, we have people from the Office of Safe Schools that are coming here on behalf of Office of Safe Schools from Tallahassee that make sure every door is locked, make sure every gate is locked, make sure that there's a single point of entry, make sure that we've done all of our fire drills and all of our lockdown drills. And if we don't do all of those in accordance with the law, then I lose my license potentially, I lose my paycheck, I lose my job. I think it is irresponsible to say, I'm going to lose my paycheck because somebody didn't do their fire drill training or their lockdown drill training, but it's okay to have a loaded gun in their car. What I'm saying to you is, this is your policy. I am not the board. This is the board policy. What you all choose to do is up to you. I have made it very clear that I want it on record that it's never going to impact my career, my license, and I will never say I think it's okay for a loaded gun, except for law enforcement who is there for a reason and they have a loaded gun for a reason. I just don't think it's okay because you never know what people will do. We see it every single day. It's on the news all the time. And I think you all have worked, one of your goals and one of your objectives is safety and security of schools, including discipline of students and discipline of everybody else. I don't think we should change a rule for one person, one situation. If that ex-husband calls the school, and now that person has That person has clearly been picking up their child for however long. That ex-husband or whoever has not called the schools yet and said, hey, just so you know, this person, those signs have been up since the beginning of the school year. Nobody's called about this person that we're aware of. But that's up to the deputies to figure out that situation. For me, it's a protection for you, it's a protection for me, and quite frankly, it's a protection for the schools. I don't think school administrators should be in the position to have to deal with that.
I agree with you.
Same. I agree.
Okay, so it doesn't look like we have any proposed language brought forward. It sounds like the board, it's a first read. So this will come back for a vote at the next meeting.
Correct. So that's those three policies. The other policy that there